Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz here in our Northwest Side studio.
And I'm Brandis Friedman reporting live from Navy Pier.
On the show tonight,
we're police officers part of the time. We're human beings the whole time.
the police union says the shooting of Anthony Alvarez was justified, but community groups say it's police brutality. We're live in Little Village.
Last year's being quite chaotic. We were open, we were closed, we were open.
Navy Pier, summer festivals, basketball games, and more. Details on the city's latest reopen plans.
In my own home state of Illinois, which has more known lead service lines than any other state in the country.
One-on-one with Senator Duckworth on her water infrastructure proposal. You got your COVID vaccine shot, but what do you do with your vaccination card? A rundown of things to know.
I'm Angel Ito, and tonight we'll be taking a trip down memory lane as we talk about the impact of Chicago's blues legacy.
You got to get creative, you got to get opportunistic.
The NFL draft is now underway. What can Bears fans expect GM Ryan Pace to do with all of the team's picks?
And Paris, as I mentioned, I'm at Navy Pier, where I'll be co-anchoring tonight as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, the pier begins its partial reopening tomorrow. This is, of course, in line with Mayor Lori Lightfoot's announcement today about a return of summer festivals, in-person hockey and basketball games, and so much more. And we'll have the latest on all of that in just a minute. But for now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. And now to some of today's top stories. Another alderman is indicted by the feds, this one with a high-profile Chicago name. 11th Ward Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson, nephew of former Mayor Richard M. Daley and grandson of Richard J. Daley, is charged with 7 counts of making false statements and filing a false tax return. The charges stem from an alleged massive fraud scheme involving the failed Washington Federal Bank for Savings that operated out of Thompson's home ward in Bridgeport. 10 other defendants have been charged in what the U.S. Attorney's Office says is an ongoing investigation into the failed bank. In a statement, Thompson denied the charges, and the U.S. Attorney's Office also is announcing 16 charges against former 22nd Ward Alderman Ricardo Munoz, charged with using political funds to pay personal expenses. A review finds significant deficiencies in the Chicago Police Department's policy and training on search warrants. This in the wake of the botched 2019 raid of Chicago resident Anjanette Young. The report comes from the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA. The agency says it has been in contact with CPD about Fourth Amendment and search warrant policies, but would not get into specifics in today's report. The CPD has 30 days to decide on fans at indoor events like Bulls and Blackhawks games, allowing for 25% capacity for games at the United Center. Bulls officials say they'll cap the crowds to about 20% due to social distancing measures. The mayor also announced the return of outdoor summer festivals and farmers markets, and we'll have much more on these reopenings in just a bit. And state public health officials report nearly 3,400 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours and 38 additional deaths. That makes for a total of 1.331 million cases and 21,927 deaths since the pandemic began. So far, more than 31% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. The families of a 22-year-old Latino man and a 13-year-old Latino boy shot and killed last month by Chicago police officers are demanding justice, and they want other Chicagoans to join them. Meanwhile, the leaders of the Fraternal Order of Police local lodge claims both shootings were justified. Amanda Vinicky joins us now live in Little Village. Amanda.
Yes, Paris, I am near a mural and a memorial near the site where on March 29th, 13-year-old Adam Toledo took his final breaths. As you'll recall, video that was released by the city's Civilian Office of Police Accountability showed Toledo running from a police officer, and then at the officer's order, Toledo did appear to toss a gun he was holding, put his hands up, but he was shot by a single bullet within seconds after. Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzara stands by the officer who fired those shots, Eric Stillman.
His response was so very calculated and textbook. It needs to be a training video, even though people won't like me saying that. I really don't give a damn. But the total control he had of what he was doing every split second that he was doing it speaks volumes for how well trained he was.
Meanwhile, just 2 days after that incident on March 31st, 22-year-old Anthony Alvarez was killed in Portage Park. Video released just yesterday shows him running from police. It is still unclear what provoked that chase. He appears to have a gun in one hand when Officer Evan Solano shot Alvarez several times. Catanzara defends that officer's actions as well.
Justifiable articulation on why he was even initiating the foot pursuit to begin with. He could clearly see a weapon in the subject's hand. It does not matter that the subject is facing away from an officer when they have a weapon. There has been instances where officers have been shot and killed with even offenders who had their hand up in the air with a weapon in their hand. It's a simple flip of the hand and one bullet.
He says the officer was clearly fearing for his life.
His reaction is, I'm going home tonight. The subject had multiple opportunities to comply and drop the weapon and stop the run, stop chasing, or being chased, I should say. But they chose yet again to not comply with lawful orders by the police. It is the recurring theme in all of these incidents, whether they're shootings or otherwise, a failure to comply with law enforcement officers' lawful direct orders.
But Alvarez's cousin says she does not understand why a police officer who was presumably wearing a bulletproof vest was so fearful. She says police are cowards, not protectors. And she also says that the city needs to immediately create and then fix a foot chase policy for the police department. Now, that is something that Mayor Lori Lightfoot has promised will come out by summer.
I know Lori said that by the summer, but that doesn't tell me anything. Another young, innocent person could die tomorrow because we don't have those on-foot protocols. And I mean, it's too late for us. We already lost Anthony.
The mayor, 2 years into her term today, reiterated that these foot pursuits are dangerous. They are also common, she says, about 7 to 10 occurring daily in the city of Chicago. Now, the mayor did tell reporters that she had considered completely ordering the police to stop all foot chases pending a policy coming out, but she decided against it.
It's always easy to say, let's just stop. But I also don't want to signal to individuals, particularly in communities that are under siege by violence, that you can avoid any accountability by running faster than the police. I think that would send a terrible message.
A foot chase policy is only one of the various changes that organizers, activists like Mother of Five, Cecilia Garcia, say have to be made. She says police act with impunity with carrying out excessive brutality against Black and brown people because, she says, there is a lack of accountability.
Here in Chicago and around the country, the police continue to gun down our young people without any repercussions, even when adhering to commands from police. Our youth are still being gunned down while white criminals who commit egregious crimes of violence are handcuffed and taken alive. We will not stand by while this injustice continues.
We'll get back to what actions they're taking in just a bit. We also have UIC John Marshall Law Associate Dean Sam Jones. He says that communities of color have long claimed that they're subject to police brutality. He says what's changing now is awareness.
What's different today is that we're able to see the slow and torturous killing of someone like a George Floyd. We're able to see what happens to a child like Adam Toledo. And so because of this awareness, we're becoming cognizant of the fact that we simply have too many problematic police officers serving in our police departments around the country.
Jones also says that situations like Toledo's in which a suspect appears to comply with an officer's orders but still is shot are particularly problematic.
This endangers our society generally, but it also endangers police officers. Because if we reach a point in society where people believe that they can't surrender to police officers safely, that they can't listen to the police officers, they're less likely to surrender their arms. They're less likely to throw their hands up, and they're more likely to shoot at the police officers or take other innocent people hostages or engage in other violent acts because they believe they'll be killed anyway.
Meanwhile, though the 30-day minimum time after a shooting has been completed, Officer Stillman is still on leave. The FOP president saying that he is traumatized by the decision he had to make that day in the alley when Adam Toledo died. Now, COPA does recommend that Officer Evan Solano be put on leave the entire time that it is investigating the Alvarez shooting.
And it just goes to show you the bias that comes out of COPA. It's not surprising to us, sadly. I already spoke to that officer myself personally several times, and I told him, be prepared. This is probably going to happen because COPA doesn't do anything fair. It's already saying that it's made a predetermined judgment that the officer was wrong on some level.
Now, Solano's decision in terms of police powers is actually up to CPD Superintendent David Brown. And as of this afternoon, when we last heard from the CPD, the Brown had not yet made a decision. Meanwhile, Anthony Alvarez's mother was right here just hours ago. She was wearing a shirt with her son's name on it. She and others are calling for Chicagoans to come on out to Portage Park on Saturday. That's May Day, where they are seeking justice and accountability for police. Organizers here saying that they believe that Officers Solano and Stillman should both be charged with murder. Paris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, thank you so much. And as we mentioned earlier, Chicago's loosening its pandemic restrictions just a bit more. The mayor made the announcement at Navy Pier this morning. The city will enter new Phase 4 regulations. That could have an impact on restaurants and bars, as well as theaters and places of worship. As part of our weekly In Your Neighborhood series, Brandis Friedman and producer Quinn Myers spent the day reporting in and around Navy Pier as it begins a phased reopening starting tomorrow. Brandis joins us now from the pier with more on these reopening plans. Brandis, spell it out. What does this all mean?
So immediately, Paris, it means increased capacity across a number of industries in Chicago, and we'll break those down for you in just a bit. But the city's Commissioner of Public Health, Dr. Allison Arwady, says the reason we are here is because the city's case numbers, positivity rates, hospitalizations, and ICU admissions have all fallen or stabilized.
Seeing those numbers go down or be stable is the ticket to reopening. This is happening, make no mistake, because people are getting vaccinated.
So here's what those loosened restrictions mean. Restaurants and bars can increase indoor capacity to 50% or 100 people, whichever is smaller. Large indoor theaters and venues, including the United Center, can open at 25% capacity. Festivals and outdoor spectator events like neighborhood food festivals can operate at 15 people per 1,000 square feet. Now, what's more, guests who are fully vaccinated will not count towards capacity limits at private indoor events like weddings. Dr. Arwady makes the case and emphasizes the need to get vaccinated and to encourage others to do the same in order for the city to keep turning that dial toward reopening. Because while the city's positivity rate is lower at 4.7%, she and the mayor warn we are not out of the woods.
What we've seen too many times across the country and other places is this enthusiasm to reopen. We saw that a lot last summer, and people went to very high capacity levels only to have to shut everything back down very quickly. Now we're in a different place than we were even last summer because we have the vaccine.
Now, the mayor and health commissioners say that if these falling cases and stabilizing rates can hold steady for the next 2 weeks, the city could join the state of Illinois in entering that bridge phase. That's where restrictions are loosened even further. Now, that would be a welcome change for tourism businesses like Steve's Segway near the lakefront. The owner there says he's been in business for 14 years, and he and his tour guides take pride in being some of the best. Many of his tour guides are part of the gig economy, and they were able to keep working other gigs during the pandemic, but he's felt like he is hemorrhaging money. With few rare Segway tours, he's lost 90 to 95% of his business.
A ghost town, or like part of a sci-fi movie, is how some of my tour guides have described the eerie feeling of being on museum campus, even at times today.
So, of course, he is hopeful to see that return. Meanwhile, the Chicago Architecture Center is still requiring masks on outdoor walking and boat tours, despite the CDC's guidance that folks who are outside and vaccinated don't necessarily need their masks. But the Chicago Architecture Center says that they are operating at a reduced capacity as well, and they're already noticing a return in interest, if not a return to normal. They say they've received quite a few calls from people looking to make reservations, and walk-up business at their box office on weekends is steady. President and CEO Lynn Osmond explains that architecture is the backbone of Chicago's tourism.
It really signals the rebirth of what's going on both after the Great Fire, but now the rebirth of the city as we look forward post-pandemic. And it's fun to see buildings like the St. Regis opening up and Salesforce Tower. So on the Architecture River Cruise, there's lots of new buildings that have kind of crept up over the pandemic year.
Now, Osmond is also the vice chair of Choose Chicago. That's the city's tourism information center. And while the CAC says that they averaged more than 80% sold capacity of its tours in April, hotels are at 50% capacity on weekends. And a survey of consumers says 32% of those surveyed are ready to travel again. So still a little bit of room to grow for a couple of those industries. Now, Paris, when we come back, as we mentioned, we're going to hear more specifically about Navy Pier's plans for reopening this weekend and what is in store here. For now, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. President Joe Biden made sweeping proposals in his address before a joint session of Congress last night. Among them, a pledge to tackle a problem felt acutely here in Chicago and Illinois: access to clean, lead-free drinking water.
And today, up to 10 million homes in America and more than 400,000 schools and child care centers have pipes with lead in them, including drinking water. A clear and present danger to our children's health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every American can drink clean water.
And Illinois reportedly has more lead service pipes than any other state in the nation. Chicago, more than any U.S. city. Illinois U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth has proposed $35 billion to update water infrastructure and improve drinking water across the country. And joining us to discuss this effort and much more is Senator Tammy Duckworth. She is chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Subcommittee on Fisheries, Water, and Wildlife. Senator Duckworth, welcome back to Chicago tonight. As we understand, your bill, the bill you sponsored, is passing out of the Senate today, that $35 billion water infrastructure bill. So what Chicagoans want to know is, will there be enough federal funds to cover 100% of lead service line replacement here in the city?
Well, I don't know that it's all going to be federal, but combination between federal, state, and city, there should be enough to replace the 100% of the lead service line in the city, yes. We have 23% of the total lead service lines across the nation is in Illinois, and most of it is in Chicago. And the goal of this legislation is to provide as much federal funding as possible. There'll be some local match, but the goal is to replace 100% of the lead service pipelines in the country.
Now, we should let our viewers know we're talking as this bill is being voted on right now in the Senate, expected to pass with bipartisan support, as I understand?
Yes, very much so. It came out of committee unanimously. When was the last time you heard of that in politics these days? But we got 100% of the Republicans on the committee to vote for it. They supported it. It's been very bipartisan. We were very careful when we were writing this bill to include a lot of concerns from rural communities, agricultural concerns. We even included verbiage to cover tribal water treatment facilities. And so this is really going to help Americans all across our great nation.
So a rare moment of bipartisan unity here. The president, as you know, last night unveiled sweeping proposals, the water part of it, but also the $1.8 billion American Families proposal that would, among other things, provide community college, universal preschool, child care, among other things, paid in part by higher taxes on wealthy earners and corporations. Could that tax part of it derail bipartisan hopes on that plan?
Well, that, you have to ask the Republicans that one. I hope that they will see a way to support the legislation. I think that the human infrastructure needs as much investment in this country as our regular transportation infrastructure and water infrastructure. We have to have infrastructure to support families and the human capital of this country. That means that kids should be able to have universal pre-K. And we know that how well a child does in the 4th grade with reading and math starts with whether or not they attend pre-K, and whether or not someone graduates high school and goes on to college is predicted by how well they do in the 4th grade. So it all comes right back to pre-K and child care and helping families be able to work outside the home and be productive outside of the home, but also take care of their families as well. That's human family infrastructure, and we need to make those investments as well as we do to fix up our roads and our bridges and our airports.
And do you believe that higher taxes on wealthy earners and corporations, as the president said, paying their fair share, quote unquote, should pay for this as opposed to not paying for it and taking out more debt?
Well, I think that corporations and wealthy individuals have gotten a pretty good ride the last 4 years. Don't forget that the Republican tax cuts gave back trillions of dollars to large corporations, who in turn went on a buying spree. They bought back stocks. They didn't put that money back into the economy. They took that money and they bought back stocks. Wealthy individuals, people who make well more than $400,000 a year, many of them in the above $40 million a year, became wealthier. During the pandemic in 2020, the very wealthiest of Americans, those who have the net worth of millions, made even more money in that time period, while hardworking Americans and working families were being laid off from work, were falling behind on their rent, on their mortgages. So I say it's time. It's time that corporations like General Electric, which by the way hasn't paid income taxes, maybe they should pay a little bit in order to educate the workforce that will one day work in GE factories.
And it seems like that notion is starting to become a bipartisan notion as well. Senator, there are a lot of priorities for Democrats. Infrastructure, that $1.9 trillion proposal, voting rights, immigration, climate legislation. Do any of these things have a chance at getting done without modifying or getting rid of the filibuster? I know you've said you're for perhaps the talking filibuster.
Right. I mean, look, I would rather not have to modify the filibuster. But at the end of the day, if you told me that my choice was between voting to protect people's voting rights or protecting the filibuster to protect the rights of 100 senators to obstruct one another, I'm going to vote on behalf of the voters. I mean, I spent 23 years in uniform defending our Constitution and our democracy. Nowhere in our Constitution is the right to the filibuster enshrined. In our Constitution, the right to vote is enshrined. So I'm always going to vote to support the rights of people's civil liberties and their ability to vote. I hope there can be bipartisanship. I was disappointed with the American Rescue Plan that not a single Republican voted for that. And that bill was desperately needed, by working families. I mean, it put money in people's pockets so that they could go ahead and pay their electricity bill and their gas bill and their back rent and their back mortgage. And it paid for vaccinations and cleaning of our schools so kids go back to schools. It really, astonished me that not a single Republican senator voted for that when it was so desperately needed by the country.
And it seems pretty clear to modify the filibuster, to do away with it. It all kind of hinges on Senator Joe Manchin, the moderate Democrat from West Virginia, who has said he is not in favor of at least getting rid of the filibuster. I'm curious, have you had any conversations with him on this subject, and do you think he would modify his position on it?
Well, if you read the op-ed that he wrote not too long ago, I think he laid out his thinking, and I just let him, people read that. He's made it clear. He said, listen, the ball is in your court, Republicans. If you're going to obstruct, then don't be surprised that this idea of filibuster reform is coming up. And he's saying that he does not support right now ending the filibuster, but that's dependent on Republicans actually not being the party of no, the party of obstruction, the party of not getting anything done. And he has said that he will consider a talking filibuster. I won't put words in his mouth, but I think that is a good intermediate step. Most people, when they think of a filibuster, they think of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Jimmy Stewart standing up to speak. That's not what the filibuster is today in practice. The filibuster today, any senator can say, all right, I'm going to filibuster this, and then they can go to Cancun on vacation if they want to. They don't have to be on the floor speaking, until they run out of, energy to do so. So a talking filibuster might be a good intermediate step.
I wonder what you're referring to with that Cancun vacation. Senator Duckworth, you recently called out the Biden administration for a lack of Asian American Pacific Islander representation in his cabinet, to which the administration responded pretty quickly. Are you satisfied that they've solved that problem? Why is that so important to you?
Well, the problem is not completely solved, but I am very pleased that they worked with me and they responded literally within hours of me indicating that I would not vote for any more nominees. And the reason I did that was because I had voted for every nominee up until that point, even before they were sworn into office. And since being sworn in, I had been working with them, moving forward and forwarding names of AAPIs who are well qualified and sometimes more qualified than the person who was eventually nominated. I had voted for every white person, every woman, every man, every person identifying LGBTQ, every Latino, every Black American that had come before the Senate from the Biden administration. I voted yes on every single one of them. And at this point in time, to not have a single AAPI person nominated to a cabinet position, I felt was really a disservice to the American people. President Biden promised a cabinet that would look like the American people, and right now it does not look like the American people because there's not a single AAPI in a cabinet secretary position. So you want more movement on that, although it did lead to the appointment of your former general counsel, Erica Mortsugu, as a deputy assistant on AAPI issues. Senator, I want to get to the issue of gun violence, obviously very important here in Chicago, experiencing a terrible year for homicides. The president brought up his support for banning assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, closing the gun show loophole. Is there any legislation on that front that has any chance at all of bipartisan support? Well, that depends on where the Republicans are. I mean, so much of this legislation is actually supported by the American people. Background checks, for example, universal background checks is supported by 95% of Americans support closing the gun show loophole. Most people don't realize this, but if you are a gun store owner today, you can choose to go out of business, say you want to retire, and you can turn your entire gun store inventory to personal use weapons. And then a year later, you could say, you know what? I don't want to hang on to these guns anymore. You can turn around and sell those thousands of weapons at gun shows and without doing any background checks or selling them, person to person. And so we need to close that loophole. And closing that loophole is very much supported by the American people. I have a bill that would have a universal FOID card like we have in Chicago to have your firearm owner's ID card. I have one of those myself. I don't own a firearm, but I have one of those because I like to target practice. There are a lot of this legislation is very bipartisan. The question is, will Republican senators vote for it, or would they just continue to be beholden to the NRA? So like a FOID card applied to the whole nation at large. Senator Duckworth, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And up next, harmonica lessons with a Chicago blues legend, so stay with us.
It really is about community where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
There's much more ahead on the program, including what to do with your vaccination card and a preview of the NFL draft. But first, Chicago's music scene is slowly reopening, and one local artist is wasting no time getting back on the stage. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to Chicago blues legend Billy Branch and shares some of his life highlights ahead of one of Branch's first live performances since the pandemic.
Blues harmonica player Billy Branch has been playing the mouth harp since he bought his first one for $1 at 11 years old.
As soon as I put it in my mouth, I could play any folk melody or Christmas carol I could think of. When that harmonica would wear out, because I'd play it all the time, I'd go back and buy another one.
This natural skill quickly turned into a passion. Branch went on to play professionally for blues legend Willie Dixon and the Chicago Blues All-Stars for 6 years.
Gonna make these pretty women jump and shout.
It was after playing at the Berlin Jazz Festival in 1977 with Dixon and several others that Branch's own group, Billy Branch and the Sons of Blues, was born.
I consider it amazing to have played with such legendary greats, Willie Dixon and Bo Diddley and Otis Rush, Junior Wells. These are the guys that laid the groundwork for the big rock scene and rock and roll.
Branch continued his commitment to the music genre by starting his International Blues in Schools initiative in 1978 that is still active today.
I've always seen part of my role as a professional musician is kind of sow the seeds. Because when I discovered the blues, the beauty of it, the depth of it, I felt like everyone should know about this.
But despite his national outreach, Branch says there's more work to be done.
It needs to be embraced by its creators, by its originators, because we have situations now where there are festivals with no black performers, blues festivals, which is kind of like an oxymoron.
What more do you think that the city could be doing to acknowledge and honor, the impact that blues has had on the city?
The city as a whole should even more fiercely embrace the blues. In a perfect world, I would like to see people like Common and Chance, who are right here in Chicago, direct some of their energies and attention to the blues and make it relevant the 21st century.
Branch has received a number of accolades acknowledging his work as both an activist and musician. Last year, he was inducted into the 2020 Blues Hall of Fame, and he recently created a song with artist Dave Spector entitled The Ballad of George Floyd that will be featured in the Woody Guthrie exhibit at the Grammy Museum.
Can you make it talk? So then you want to do you?
As Branch continues to educate and advocate, he says his mission remains the same: to give blues the recognition it deserves.
Everyone can relate to this because it is the soundtrack for the human condition. Everybody goes through struggles, everybody has problems. And the blues is a way of releasing and expressing this and making it not feel so bad.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And Billy Branch and the Sons of the Blues will be celebrating the birthday of blues icon Little Walter this Friday and Saturday at Rosa's Blues Lounge. Visit our website for more information. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, should you carry your COVID vaccination card with you, or what if you lost it? We have a rundown of things to know. And we're live from Navy Pier with more on the city's reopening plans and the eventual return of live theater. After the Bears failed to impress last season, what kind of reinforcements can head coach Matt Nagy expect from the NFL draft? But first, some more of today's top stories. Lakeshore Drive is one step closer to getting a new name. A city council committee passed an ordinance to rename the outer drive in honor of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable after a contentious hearing today. The name change would cover 17 miles of the drive from Hollywood North to 67th. Mayor Lightfoot has been chilly to the name change, instead proposing to name the downtown Riverwalk after du Sable. The proposal still faces a full city council vote. And state public health officials report nearly 3,400 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours and 38 additional deaths. That makes for a total of 1.331 million cases and 21,927 deaths since the pandemic began. So far, more than 31% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. Shades of the 1980s in the Loop. City leaders say State Street will be shut down to vehicle traffic on as many as 12 Sundays throughout this summer, starting July 11th. It'll be dubbed Sundays on State by the Chicago Loop Alliance, and it'll bring outdoor dining, retail, performances, and family-friendly activities to the iconic street. The shutdowns will take place between Lake and Madison Streets, and they're seen as a way to get people excited about coming back to the Loop. If you've received the COVID-19 vaccine, you probably got a vaccination card that includes your name and the dates you received your first and second shots. So now that you have it, what do you do with it? WTTW News reporter Kristen Tomitz joins us now to answer that question and more. Kristen, great to see you. So you asked our newsroom staff and other folks what kinds of questions they have about their COVID vaccination card. Let's take a look at some of those, beginning with that first question. What should I do with my vaccine card? Should I carry it with me?
Hi, Paris. And no, you should not carry your vaccine card with you after you've been fully vaccinated. Now, you will need to bring that card to your second appointment if you're getting a 2-dose shot that's either Pfizer or Moderna. But other than that, everyone I spoke to said keep that card in a safe place with other important documents like your passport.
Yeah, it'd be easy to lose that. Another question, I didn't get a vaccination card at my appointment. How can I get one now?
Sure. Start by contacting the vaccination provider where you got your shot, whether that was at a doctor's office or a pharmacy or a mass vaccination site. They should be able to give you a card. You can also request proof of vaccination from the Illinois Department of Public Health, which keeps a record of every patient's immunizations in a database. All you have to do is fill out a form to request that.
All right, and hopefully most folks have their card. How about this one? How can I prove my vaccination status without carrying my card everywhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says to take a photo of the card. That way you have a digital copy. But the Illinois Department of Public Health is saying right now proof of vaccination isn't being required at this time at most places. But the state agency is working on ways to kind of come up with a way so people can show that they are vaccinated. Meanwhile, Chicago officials are launching their own vaccination passport that'll be rolled out this summer for vaccinated folks to go to concerts and summer events.
Well, we'll have to see what that looks like. My vaccine card is in my passport. It's funny that you said that. In a safe place.
Good.
Let's hope. All right, Kristen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ferris.
And you can read Kristen's full story on our website, where you can read more about COVID vaccination cards, like what to do if you lose it. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And now we're joined again by Brandis Friedman, who spent the day at Navy Pier as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Brandis.
Yeah, Paris, you can tell the weather has picked up a little bit since the last time we spoke. But earlier today as well, we stopped by the Chicago Shakespeare Theater, which is right here at Navy Pier. And we spoke with artistic director Barbara Gaines. And I began by asking her what this past year has been like for the company.
All theaters throughout the world have been shuttered. And so it's been extremely challenging. And I think the best way to explain it would be that, you know, theater people in the performing arts have just not had any oxygen for 14 months, and it's been tough.
What's that been like for your artists and the partners you work with?
Well, I think the artists are suffering the most, really, because especially actors who are on stage, there's no on stage to be. So our technicians, our designers, all blessed actors. I mean, it has really been a challenge for all of them, individually and as a group.
You've been able to pivot a little bit over the last year, though, with your some virtual programming. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've had a blast doing virtual programming, I must say. The most recent programming we've had, and they're still on right now, is I Cinna and I Banquo, directed by Tyrone Phillips and Marty Lyons. And the joy of these one-people shows, or one has a child and an adult, is that it's completely creative. It is a full production, less than an hour, both of them. And they are so inventive and imaginative, and language is so important. And the performances truly are spectacular. And we've got just tremendous excitement out there in the webland in terms of appreciation for these two shows. We've also just done, as you know, to be 423, which was a celebration of life returning to the performing arts, which we performed on the roof of the parking garage at Navy Pier. And that was a blast. You had singers, you had dancers. There were great interviews, a part of it. And again, this is still, you can just get on our website, Chicago Shakes, and /2B.
Now, today the mayor announced that for theater venues, as part of the Reopen Chicago plan, large venues, including United Center, can host 25% of their capacity. But what does that mean for you?
Well, I think that, I think for all of the performing arts, it is a bit of a struggle to only have 25%. I have to say, the only thing that matters to us at Chicago Shakes right now is safety and health of everyone, of our staff, of audience members, of you. I mean, that is everything. And once we are allowed to gather in slightly larger groups, I think that we will be gathering with joy. And we will be thrilled to see people back in this beautiful theater. Look at all those empty seats. We got to fill them up.
What does it mean then for you for the summer? We're typically used to seeing, Chicago Shakes in the park.
Right.
And then obviously, what are your plans for the fall when hopefully things are better?
Right. Well, we're doing a special project in the summer, which I'm just, we're just working on now. So I'm just going to keep that a little teased, but it's going to be great. And then in the fall, we have a really exciting production of As You Like It. Within the entire show are the Beatles songs. So the song like Come Together Right Now can be our mantra. And,
So are you hoping then that will be in person?
Like it that will be.
That's the plan.
That's the plan, for everybody to be in person and to hear the music of the Beatles and the music of Shakespeare and a phenomenal cast having a blast together. What a wonderful way to welcome people as I look around here. I know there'll be laughter. I'll know there'll be brilliant, happy music from the Fabulous Four, right? And we're really, you know what? This opening of Navy Pier right now is a marker. It is a symbol of life coming back to all of our lives, of seeing your families again, of going out and enjoying life. And we couldn't be more thrilled that this moment is here.
And Paris, that was Chicago Shakespeare Theater's artistic director, Barbara Gaines. When we come back, maybe from a less windy location, we'll have a little bit more information on this location and what's in store for Navy Pier. Back to you.
All right, Prentice, get some protection from that squall out there. Thanks. And great to see Barbara Gaines in Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Up next, we dive into the NFL draft with James Big Cat Williams. But first, a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
The Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson.
And the NFL draft in Cleveland is underway right now, and Bears fans are hoping for some game-ready reinforcements after a disappointing end to last season. The Bears have 8 picks, including the 20th pick in the first round. So will they finally get that franchise quarterback? Joining us to give his take is James Big Cat Williams, former offensive lineman for the Bears from 1991 to 2002. Hey, James, great to see you.
Hey, Paris, how are you, man?
I'm getting by. I'm excited here, but first off, we got to talk about the other excitement happening in the NFL. Apparently, Aaron Rodgers is not going to return to the Packers next year. Are you hearing that?
That's what I'm hearing. That's what he's saying right now. The Packers still hold all the power. He's under contract. If he chooses not to play, he's got a lot of money to give back. I don't think it's about the money. I think it's about, what he's feeling as far as being disrespected, as far as, bringing Jordan Love in to be a backup quarterback or to be the person that is going to take over for Rodgers. And, Rodgers not knowing anything about it. You're a 2-time NFL MVP, offensive MVP, and your organization can't come to you and tell you that, we're gonna pick up a young quarterback to groom for the future. I get it.
Could be good news for the Chicago Bears, though, and the rumors are that he might land in Denver with the former Bears defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. All right, so with the 20th pick in the NFL draft, the Bears select who?
I'd like to say Tevin Jenkins, a tackle, someone that can come in right now and play and contribute to what the team needs to have done. But you also have other needs. You have wide receiver, a guy like Terrence Marshall from LSU that could still be there around the 20th pick. So there are a lot of options. And the one thing about the draft is things change every second. So, a guy that might be on their board, that might be very high on their board at the 15th pick, might be gone by 16. So you just never know what's going to happen until it's your turn.
And everybody knows the Bears want to get a franchise quarterback at some point. This may not be the draft to do it. Do you anticipate some kind of big, crazy trade where the general manager, Ryan Pace, trades up 15 picks or something like that so he can land a quarterback?
No, I don't see that happening. I think that there is, first of all, I don't think they have enough capital to move up high enough in the draft to get one of the big five quarterbacks. And then once you start talking about the quarterbacks after that, you're talking about quarterbacks that can go at the end of the second round, early third round. So, for them to move up just to take a guy that they could probably get in the second, third round, we've heard this story before, and I don't think we want to see it happen again.
Is there a good guy in the second or third round do you think they should be targeting?
Well, there's a kid by the name of Davis Mills that is out of Stanford, big quarterback, 6'3", 215 pounds, stands well in the pocket. They're going to talk about a few issues that he's had as a senior coming out of high school. He hurt his knee, hurt it again after that season was over, and then had some issues with it in college. He's had a couple surgeries on it, but he's the type of quarterback you're looking for. Big, athletic, he's been through a lot, so he can deal with a lot. And he seems to be a good leader for that he was a good leader for that Stanford team.
Well, at some point, like a broken clock being right twice a day, the Bears have to draft a quarterback that actually works out here. And to that end, I mean, the Bears aren't just on the clock. Isn't Ryan Pace, the general manager, on the clock? I mean, he really needs to prove something here because it just hasn't been such good going lately.
Yeah, I think that whole building is on notice. I think everyone that is a decision maker in that building is on notice right now, because if you come into this season and no matter who you pick in the draft, whether you're able to get who you think is your franchise quarterback, or if you take an offensive tackle at pick 20 that helps solidify that offensive line, unless you win games during the season, none of it's going to matter for these guys.
I agree with you. Solidify that offensive line and get a good running game going. Andy Dalton is the Bears starting quarterback, barring some crazy move tonight. What can Bears fans expect out of Andy Dalton?
I'm really not sure. I mean, Andy Dalton was a guy that was low on their list last year when they were looking at quarterbacks. They ended up getting Foles. Andy Dalton goes to Dallas, plays a couple games in Dallas because Prescott gets hurt. He gets hurt. So it's kind of, they're just cycling through old quarterbacks right now, or quarterbacks that have the potential to be a starting block for a young guy. But, as of right now, they don't have that young guy in the ranks to teach.
But it could be a much different landscape. Again, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come to the Packers, suddenly it doesn't seem that scary. I wanted to ask you your reflections. We heard the news earlier this week that former Bears great, a defensive tackle, Steve McMichael, announced he's struggling with ALS. Your reaction to that?
I'm sad. When I first got here in '91 as a defensive lineman, Steve McMichaels was one of those guys that kind of took me under his wing. Richard Dent, Steve McMichaels, Fridge. Those guys taught me what it was like to be in the NFL, the things that I needed to do, the way I needed to act. And it's hard to, see where he is now. And, you listen to him and he still sounds like the same old Steve, the same old Mongo. But, then you get to see him and it's like, everything's changed. He's not that big muscular guy that, just had everything on the tip of his tongue and wasn't scared to say it.
Yeah, and it's just, you don't talk to anybody in this industry, football or broadcasting, that doesn't say he's just a great guy. They just have the kindest things to say about him. Very quickly, you've got a high school football season underway right now at Lake Forest. How's that going?
Well, we're done. Oh, okay. Fortunately, we were able to go 6-0 or so.
Oh, congrats.
Camps. Yeah. Congratulations to the Lake Forest Scouts.
All right. Well, and just for our viewers that don't know, you're a coach there at Lake Forest, and it was a spring football season because of the strange situation with COVID. Also, Aaron Rodgers, if you're watching, Chicago it's a good place. It really is. I mean, so who knows? Let's not give up hope. Our thanks to James Big Cat Williams. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paris. Have a good one.
You too. And up next, Brandis Friedman joins us live from Navy Pier, hopefully in a safer setting, with more on the city's reopening plans. So stick around.
Don't ever miss Chicago Tonight. Subscribe to our podcast. Get a daily download of our show delivered to your desktop or mobile device. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight Podcast and subscribe.
And now we check back in with Brandis Friedman, who's co-anchoring tonight's show from Navy Pier as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Brandis, looks like you got out of the elements a little bit there.
Yeah, we found a better spot. We're a few yards from where we started off, and it's surprisingly a lot better right here. So right now we are joined by Payal Patel. She's the communications director for Navy Pier. Thank you so much for meeting us out here in these conditions. First, tell us a little bit about this location and where we are on the pier briefly.
We are at Offshore Rooftop and Bar on Navy Pier. This is the largest rooftop bar in North America. It was actually the largest rooftop in the world and documented by Guinness Book of World Records. So this is an iconic and treasured place for us at the pier, newly reopened.
Now, we know that a phased reopening is beginning for Navy Pier starting tomorrow. What's in the works?
So the first phase of the pier's reopening includes outdoor spaces for the most part, North and South Dock, Polk Brothers Park, Pier Park. And what's great about Pier Park's reopening is that the rides and attractions will be a part of this reopening. It wasn't last year when we temporarily closed after the pandemic hit in March. We weren't able to reopen our iconic rides and attractions like the Centennial Wheel, the Pepsi Wave Swinger. That'll now be reopened, and we're excited to get people back on their rides safely. We'll be doing thorough cleaning after every use, and only people you came with will enter the gondola with you.
Okay, so what won't be open for visitors when they make their way back down?
So indoor spaces, including the Fifth Third Bank Family Pavilion, the inside food court areas, that's not quite part of this phased reopening. The second phase will include them. So we're just easing our way back in, seeing how things go in these next coming weeks, and then sometime in May, we anticipate on reopening all of our indoor spaces as well.
How would you describe the impact on some of the businesses here over this past year as it regards to restaurants and such?
Yeah, there are nearly 70 businesses across the entire pier. That includes retail shops, restaurants, tour boats, and cruises. So all had been impacted obviously by Navy Pier's temporary closure, but that closure was done with them in mind. With the intention of getting them to the other side of the pandemic. The operational costs would just have been too high when there's not enough revenues and attendance coming in. So we've helped a lot of them make it to this other side. Most of them are coming back, and we're so thrilled to see them come back. So some of the restaurants will be opening as part of this first phase. The outdoor patios, and then those that have the capacity to manage people inside can do so. Then the retail shops will be part of the second phase of the reopening. But it's great to see them all come back.
Yeah. Now, Navy Pier, you also often host, conventions, art shows, other major events. Any idea on, when those might begin to return?
Well, today's great news that the mayor announced will be so advantageous for Navy Pier, right? Because Navy Pier is a popular place for private events, consumer shows, weddings. And so while the private consumer shows are going to take a little bit of time, today's news will help us move in the right direction for private events that relate to weddings and corporate events. And the great news about not having those who are fully vaccinated count against your capacity limit restrictions, that's going to be so great for us to be able to host those people that want to have those private spaces, including here at Offshore. You could host your wedding here, and now the capacity will probably be more flexible to accommodate.
Also, and you've opened a new hotel as of late as well within the last year. So Payal Patel, Communications Director for Navy Pier, thank you so much for joining us. And Paris, we'll have to send it back to you for now.
All right, Brandis, and be careful out there. Looks like it's calmed down for now, but you know the weather in Chicago, especially among the lakefront, can change in a dime.
Just wait 5 minutes.
5 seconds even. All right, and that is our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for the Week in Review. And we leave you tonight with some more from Chicago blues legend Billy Branch. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois leading lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.